erudite, honest, wise, genuine, clever, and he was an upstanding member of society. I'd like to talk today about Owen Ingram Richards, who was my husband of 21 years. He was a very interesting man. Owen told a few funny stories about his life in Wollongong. He started off on a paper run, not realising the rules of the game, and he actually encroached on the territory of some other boy's paper run, and the other boy let him know fairly quickly that wasn't the done thing, so I don't think the paper run lasted for very long. One day he was walking down the street and saw one of his friends, looked like he was on a mission, and he said to his friend, "Where are you going?" And his friend said, "Oh, I'm going down to join the army. Why don't you come with me?" And Owen thought, "Oh, that's a good idea." He was 16 at the time. "Yeah, okay, I'm a man now." So off he went, joined the army. I'm not quite sure that would be legal these days, but in those days it was. He went home, said to his mum and dad, "Oh, guess what? I've just joined the army." They said, "Oh, no, you haven't." And they marched him back down there to the recruiting office and found that, well, yes, he had joined the army and it was all legal. So he was shipped off down to Victoria, and he spent, well, most of the rest of his life really based in Victoria one way or another, with various jaunts off elsewhere. And he came down to a place called Balcombe and was known as Boys Town because it was a pretty rough place for a young lad to come to. And he had a few adventures down there, including doing a little stint in solitary confinement for having driven the commanding officer's car around the Oval a few times, and he thought it was funny, but he didn't think solitary confinement was funny, and he often said that was just way too harsh for a young lad. And really that was Owen's start of a long career in the army. He started off as an apprentice and ended up as a lieutenant colonel, and in fact he when he had retired from the army, they couldn't let go of him and they kept him on as Colonel Commandant of the 3rd Military District, which is Victoria, and so he kept serving after he'd finished serving, as it were. This all coincided with the Vietnam War, of course, and he went to Vietnam 3 times and spent about a year all up in Vietnam as a career army officer. He lost some friends in Vietnam and he never forgot them, quite often mentioned them. Another thing that he was involved in, which was really important to him, was the SAS. He was a paratrooper. I can't remember how many times he actually jumped out of an aeroplane. He said it was an incredibly unnatural thing to do. He didn't like doing it, but he did it, and of course had to lead his troops in doing that. But it was not something that he continued on after he left the forces. He wasn't keen on doing that at all, but he did it. Yeah, so after the war, he was seconded to the British Army in Germany, and he was over there, I think he was a captain at the time, and the whole family was there with him, his wife and 4 boys. One of the funny things that did happen with his time there was that, and there's a photo that looks like him being chewed out by a general. Well, that was the story, that the general was really cautioning Owen, but in the photo it's a bit hard to tell who's cautioning whom. Owen followed his father and grandfather into Freemasonry and was a past master of the Army Lodge. In his own inimitable style, he decided that we'd do something different during his year as master, and instead of having the ladies dining in night at the usual venue in the usual way, he decided it'd be much more fun to join in with some of the Sydney people who were come down to visit Melbourne, Sydney Lodge people. And so instead of having a ladies' night, we had a picnic at Puffing Billy. And we had a lovely day. It was really good. He ruffled a few feathers by doing this, but that didn't bother Owen. He wanted to do something different, and he did. Owen was interested in a lot of things throughout his life. One of those things was racehorses, and he was part owner of a few different racehorses, nothing that won the Melbourne Cup, unfortunately. But he was really interested in those for a while. He was an expert on the ancient Roman army, Roman history. He actually went off and learnt Latin as well at night school because he wanted to be able to read the Latin texts in the original rather than someone else's translation. And that says a lot about Owen's character too. He wanted to get right there and find out what was really being said. He was also an expert on the American Civil War, and ask him any question about that subject, and he'd know where the battle was and who fought in it, who fell off his horse. Later in his life, he became very interested in the stock market and share trading, so much so that he spent a lot of time online learning computer programs, learning how the market worked, buying lots and lots of books about it. He was involved in a Sunday Traders Club with acknowledged experts in the field, and he actually became a published expert himself because he wrote and was published 3 or 4 different stories in magazines that people would read, and people started to really look for his opinion on the stock market. Opinion was really well respected. One thing you had to know about Owen was that he loved to sing. He grew up in the era of radio, and his mother had the radio on all the time when he was growing up. And he learned the words to every song that ever came on the radio. So if you wanted to know, what are the words to such and such a song, he'd know it and he could sing it for you. Not only that, but with his imagination, he was able to remember songs about any subject that you could mention. You could say a word, boomerang, dog, tree, cupcake. He'd have a song, and within 5 seconds he'd be singing that song. So that was a little game that we used to play sometimes, especially going along in the car when Tom was little. That was a good one. Owen's service in the army really caused him a lot of problems, health problems later in life. It's fine when you're a young man, you sort of ride over these things and get through them. But as you get older, habits from earlier times really take their toll. And in the army, cigarettes and alcohol were next to free. They were really cheap. And of course, he smoked and he drank. And these caused a lot of problems for him in later life. He had a lot of health problems. And he actually had open heart surgery in 1994. That was 4 years after we were married, so that was a really worrying time. And he had asthma. In fact, he'd suffered from asthma for quite a while, and he was misdiagnosed in a way with asthma. It wasn't until he changed doctors one day that the doctor said, you've got heart problems. And Owen said, I haven't got heart problems. What are you talking about? The doctor was reaching for the phone to make an appointment with a cardiac specialist immediately. And really it went on from there, and in the end his breathing just became so difficult. It was a really difficult time towards the end of Owen's life, and in the last few months of his life he had 5 rides in the ambulance to hospital as an emergency. It just became so desperate. Owen was a great husband, a great companion in life. He was a great father, and he's very much missed.